You know who's also a dude? Mark Teixeira might be a Hall of Famer. On the surface, it seems like Mark Teixeira should definitely be a Hall of Famer. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's a 5-time Gold Glover. He's a 2009 World Series champion. He hit 409 home runs, which is 5th all-time among switch hitters. And he has a career baseball reference WAR of 50.6. But there is one player that didn't make the Hall of Fame that I think we can reference. Fred McGriff was an incredible first baseman through the 80s and the 90s and into the early 2000s. But Fred McGriff had 2 more All-Star appearances, hit 82 more home runs, had a better batting average, 600 more hits, a better on-base percentage, a better WRC plus, and a 52.6 WAR, which is 2 wins above Teixeira. And Fred McGriff is not currently a Hall of Famer. Teixeira will most likely not make the Hall, but he is regarded as one of the best first basemen in the 21st century due to his ability to hit with the best of them, but also be a fantastic defender at first base. And it should also be mentioned that his WAR on Fangraphs sits at 44.6. And the difference, obviously, again, lies on the defensive side where Fangraphs uses UZR and Baseball Reference uses DRS in their evaluation. But numbers schmumbers. Remember the walk-off home run in Game 2 of the ALDS in 2009? He'll remain on the ballot because he was incredible and he's one of the greatest switch hitters we've ever seen.
Yeah, like Tex and Beltran. When I think switch hitters in the 2000s, maybe even early 2010s, I'll say 2000s. I think Mets Beltran and I think Rangers Teixeira. Yeah. That's genuinely what I think. Like, there's something to be said about a guy that can hit the ball out from both sides and be exceptional defensively. I mean, Teixeira was the better version of Berkman. I constantly saw Lance Berkman when he was playing the Cubs, right? And I was like, oh, this is just that big, bad dude. He's like the villain in the movie when he comes to take care of your protagonist, and he does. That was what Berkman was. That was what Teixeira was. When Teixeira
more runs than Berkman.
Right? When Teixeira was a Ranger and when he was a Yankee, he was so good at being the villain. And he's a good guy. Like, that's the thing.
He is a good guy.
Teixeira, by the way, great on ESPN too when he was
just about
doing.
To say that.
Yeah, I mean he was awesome. He parlayed it into a broadcasting career, and he was really good at that. Teixeira, there's just something about being feared to me, and I think to the writers, there's something about being feared. You know, if you are this guy who transcends what you are on the field, you get love. That's just how that works, right? Derek Jeter, I mean, you can bitch about his defensive seasons, but he transcended what he was on the field.
Yeah. And even we're looking at WAR, which, you know, has a lot of defensive metrics piled into there. Derek Jeter's still a 73 WAR guy. He's still getting in regardless, like no matter what. Yeah. So, but it's funny, I compared him to Fred McGriff, and maybe that's not as fair because Fred McGriff was not a switch hitter, but how do we evaluate? Like, do we put more importance on that? Or do we just say, I mean, it doesn't really matter from what side you hit from the matter. We got to look at the whole career. And did you produce like everybody else? I don't know if you should just get this extra bump because of the switch hitters. He's one of the greatest of all time. That's why when I'm looking at him, it's like, he doesn't stack up to a guy like Fred McGriff, who should be in the Hall of Fame. Like should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
He just didn't have the 500 career home runs. He didn't quite have 3,000 hits. So it was just like in that time, he just didn't get it. But Teixeira is another guy who doesn't quite have any of those numbers, but it's also less than McGriff. And we just saw McGriff not make it. He could still get into the Veterans Committee. But as of this moment, getting voted into the Hall of Fame, I just don't see it. Do you see it?
No, I don't see it. It seems bleak. And I think
if Fred
yeah, unfortunately, but you know, that's what we're doing. We're sifting out all the no's. We're going to get to the yes later.
And it's fun.
It's fun. We love looking back at Tex. We love looking back at Jake Peavy. I don't really love looking back at Papelbon, but I love looking back at Carl Crawford.
I think it's fun to look back at Papelbon.
It was funny to look back at Papelbon. But you know, it's one of those things where if Fred McGriff was in, I think we're having a different conversation about Teixeira.
Agreed.
Like if Crime Dog is in, then Tex immediately gets in. He's like, oh yeah, I mean, he's Fred McGriff.
I don't know immediately though. Like he has like 80 home runs less, like 600 less hits.
But
I don't know.
I love precedent.
Yeah, but
I'm
I
a
also
sucker for precedent.
I think an underrated part of Teixeira's career was he really was a phenomenal defensive first baseman, like a
Yeah.
really, really good one. That matters.
Who's the
First
modern
base.
day Mark Teixeira?
Matt Olson, kind of.
No,
Well, no, not a switch hitter. The
Say,
modern day
well,
Mark Teixeira.
he's not a switch hitter. I'm just thinking when I think of Mark Teixeira, I just immediately think of Paul Goldschmidt too. Like something
Oh.
about that, right?
Thing is, now I almost said Matt Olson because Paul Goldschmidt has like crazy speed.
Yeah.
Like he's like stolen 20 bases. I feel like Goldschmidt Teixeira was never the athlete that Goldschmidt is. I feel like
Right.
Olson makes sense because they're both power guys. They're both phenomenal defenders. Will Matt Olson ever be as good as Mark Teixeira? It remains to be seen. But that's what I thought of initially. But I like the Goldschmidt comp just because of the consistency and the fact that year in, year out, we got 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, 280. Like that's what Teixeira was. He's a career 268 hitter. Like even in his dog days, I mean, in the good years, he was 280, 290, 300. He was a great hitter.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking inevitable future Yankee Mark Teixeira. You knew that he was going to be a Yankee at some point when he was on the Rangers. You're comparing him to inevitable future Yankee Matt Olson right now. So
that's a good way to end the podcast.
That's a good way to end the podcast. That's all up
for interpretation.
Well, we know how we're interpreting it. He's Peter. I'm Jack. Every link you need is in the episode description. And
thank you, everybody.